welcome you watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Well, we have a packed show for you as always, and our top story today is from Canada. Ties between India and Canada, already frosty for many years, have now plunged to an all-time low, with the two countries expelling each other's diplomats in the last 24 hours. How do things get to this point? On Monday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told the Canadian Parliament that his administration believed Indian agents were linked to the killing of Khalistani separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar, claiming there were credible allegations in this regard. Canada then expelled a top Indian diplomat. Trudeau and his foreign minister, Melanie Joly, added that any form of foreign government's involvement in the killing of a Canadian citizen is a blatant violation of Canada's sovereignty. As a swift response, India summoned the Canadian High Commissioner to New Delhi and expelled a senior Canadian diplomat, giving him 5 days to leave the country. Reacting to Trudeau's allegations, India termed them absurd and motivated. The statement issued by India's External Affairs Ministry says we are a democratic polity with a strong commitment to the rule of law. Such unsubstantiated allegations seek to shift the focus from Khalistani terrorists and extremists who've been provided shelter in Canada and continue to threaten India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The inaction of the Canadian government on this matter has been a long-standing and continuing concern. That Canadian political figures have openly expressed sympathy for such elements remains a matter of deep concern. The statement goes on to say the space given in Canada to a range of illegal activities including murders, human trafficking and organized crime is not new. We urge the Government of Canada to take prompt and effective legal action against all anti-India elements operating from their soil. These developments come close on the heels of the Canadian Prime Minister's very awkward visit to India for the G20 summit. He skipped the official dinner hosted by India for the G20 leaders and other special guests. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who held one-on-one talks with several world leaders in New Delhi, barely spent 5 minutes talking to Justin Trudeau on the sidelines of the summit. The vibes between the two leaders were evidently cold. And significantly, Prime Minister Modi gave Trudeau an earful over his government's inaction against anti-India Khalistani elements and extremists who've been given a free run in Canada for several years now, especially since Trudeau came to office. India's press statement minced no words either, stating, India conveyed its strong concerns about continuing anti-India activities of extremist elements in Canada. Soon after, negotiations between India and Canada on a free trade agreement were suddenly paused. Let's now look at the man whose killing the Justin Trudeau government is accusing India of being involved in. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was gunned down by two masked gunmen outside a Gurudwara or Sikh temple in the British Columbia province of Canada in June this year. Canadian authorities have not made a single arrest in this case so far. 45-year-old Nijjar was the chief of the separatist organization, the Khalistan Tiger Force. He was also associated with banned Indian separatist group Sikhs for Justice and seen as its number 2 leader. Nijjar was designated a terrorist by India in 2020 over his support for the Khalistani movement, multiple anti-India activities including organizing so-called referendums on Khalistan on Canadian soil and even involvement in incitement to violence hurting Indian interests. Only recently, open threats were issued to India's top diplomats including High Commissioner in Ottawa by separatist Sikh organizations that have long been banned by India. Nijjar's involvement in terrorism started with his membership in Babbar Khalsa International. Subsequently, he established the Khalistan Tiger Force and played a significant role in identifying, connecting, training and funding Khalistani cells in India, according to Indian agencies. As we said, relations between India and Canada have been frosty for several years now. India accuses Canada of promoting secessionism by not only being soft on Khalistani forces, but actually sympathizing with them and looking the other way every time a Khalistani rally is organized or threats of violence against India's missions and envoys are issued. Justin Trudeau calls it freedom of expression. Trudeau heard similar Indian concerns when he visited the country back in 2018. Many observers had said that he had been cold-shouldered by the Indian government. The Sikh community in Canada, the largest outside of India, is home to more than 770,000 members of the Sikh community. The Khalistan movement is a major national security threat to India, and many groups associated with the movement have been listed as terrorist organizations by the Indian government. The trouble is, while for India it's a matter of national security and it rightly expects a fellow democracy to act against anti-India forces on its soil, for the Canadian Prime Minister, on the other hand, it seems to be a clear case of cynical vote bank politics. Scores of Khalistani supporters constitute Trudeau's support base, having voted for him over the years. Some of them have even found their way into his government. So even as these banned extremist Sikh organizations hold anti-India rallies, so-called Khalistani referendums, even issue threats to Indian diplomats and call for violence against them, and celebrate the assassination of former Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who was killed at the height of the Khalistani movement in the 1980s, the Justin Trudeau government continues to turn a Nelson's eye to each of these activities in the name of freedom of expression. The question is, how should India deal with such brazenness and disregard for its security concerns on part of Canada? And what do these latest and dramatic developments mean for India-Canada ties that seem to have hit rock bottom?
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the Government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Any involvement of a foreign government in the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil is an unacceptable violation of our sovereignty.
First and foremost, I would like to extend my condolences to the family and loved ones of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. The allegations that a representative of a foreign government may have been involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen here in Canada on Canadian soil is not only troubling, but it is completely unacceptable. If proven true, this would be a grave violation of our sovereignty and of the most basic rule of how countries deal with each other. We've been clear we will not tolerate any form of foreign interference. Since this was brought to our attention, we've been guided by three principles. The first one, we will seek the truth. The second one, we will protect Canadians at all times. And thirdly, we will protect Canada's sovereignty. I've conveyed these principles to my Indian counterpart, and I've also told him that we expect India's full collaboration to make sure that we get to the bottom of this. And as of today, and as a consequence, we've expelled a top Indian diplomat from Canada.
I think those claims are quite absurd. He's made a claim without evidence, and having made the claim, he's taken an action, i.e. to expel the Indian diplomat, etc. And now he wants us to cooperate with him. What is he saying? The whole thing sounds very absurd and illogical to me. And I mean, if you're in a normal relationship, this kind of thing happens, you consult your friendly neighbor, your friend, and say, look, this is what your fellows are doing, I think we need to look at it, and then you sort it out. But he just decided something on it's apparently for his own domestic reasons. That's exactly what I said earlier, that, you know, things like this happen between two countries, that there is a dispute, there is an argument on certain issues, and you find that you need to talk. Then you talk. Two sovereign nations must talk about things, but this man has just gone around and decided that he has to do it like this. I think his visit to India for G20, he wasn't very happy with that, nor was he with this 218 visit when he came then. So, and then I think there are some domestic issues also, but elections and so on, that's not my problem. The problem is that you have a decorum, you have a relationship, you maintain it. You go by the laid down principles. If we are a friendly country, we are not enemies in that sense, but he makes it look as if we are. I don't know where he's got that from. But remember, there was this Canadian hand in the Kanishk bombing.
All right. So what should we make of these dramatic developments that really seem to have led to India-Canada ties that were already quite frosty, hitting pretty much rock bottom? Let's analyze this with our panel of experts. Joining me on the show tonight, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, senior journalist and foreign affairs expert, Ambassador Anil Trigunyat and Ambassador Manju Seth, former diplomats, are also with us on the show. Ambassador Manju Seth, let me start with you. This separatist leader who India designated as a terrorist was gunned down in June of this year. It has been 3 whole months. The Canadian authorities haven't made a single arrest in connection with his killing. Now suddenly the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau decides to blame India for the killing and as a result expels one of our top diplomats. I can't help but think Justin Trudeau could simply not deal with the snub that he received from New Delhi during the G20 summit. At a time when Prime Minister Modi held one-on-one talks with almost all world leaders who were here, Justin Trudeau got to spend all of 5 minutes with our Prime Minister. Not only that, he got an earful from the Prime Minister for the anti-India activities that have been going on Canadian soil for a long time, and the press release issued by the Indian side said so. What is Justin Trudeau playing at here? Just what's going on? Yes, we know that this is cynical vote bank politics that has gone on for a very long time, but to take things this far?
Yes, it is absolutely quite difficult to understand what's playing up in his mind because, yes, I think the slight cold vibes that were visible during the G20 meeting and the PM was not over-effusive. Our PM was not very effusive with him. So I think that may have been a factor for the sudden, action that he has taken. And also, it's vote bank politics, of course, but his very government depends on the NDP, which is, Jagdeep, I think his name is Hardeep Singh. He is a Khalistani sympathizer. He's very much in cahoots with them. And so if his government will fall. So that is, of course, one aspect of the whole thing. But at the same time, the way that it has been worded, the allegations are there. On allegations, you don't take action. As mentioned by the former RAW chief also, we need to not take action on allegations. We have to discuss it, get the credible evidence, and then take it up with the concerned government and then take the next steps. But obviously, those correct procedures or those international norms are not being followed by Prime Minister Trudeau. And he is influenced very, very strongly by his coalition partner in the government and by what is happening. And if you look at what he has been saying all these days, and even when he was in India, saying that we support free speech. Free speech does not mean hate speech. It does not mean that you allow people to protest on the roads on the streets and say that we will kill so-and-so, so-and-so, calling for killing. That is not a peaceful protest. When you issue death threats and you call people, incite people to kill, I think that is not at all a peaceful protest. Wouldn't define it as that. And his very approach to the whole issue has been one of soft glove handling, of course, but also he has just not been bothered over the years. India has been conveying the right picture and saying these are terrorists. And even when Chief Minister Amarinder Singh handed over these the list of terrorists wanted in Punjab for the various activities, and Nijjar's name was there. But of course, the Canadian government did not pay any attention to it. They did not care. So you can go on speaking. So that speaks of a degree of arrogance, I think, also. And whatever India says is not important, is not credible. What we have is credible. And even then, the foreign minister saying allegations of credible allegations. What do you mean by credible allegations? I found that a very...
I agree with you, Ambassador. I mean, the least that they could have done was to have shared the so-called evidence with the Indian government before enacting this drama so publicly. Pramit Pal Chaudhary, let me come to you. You know, to say that Justin Trudeau has been turning a Nelson's eye to anti-India activities on Canadian soil would be an understatement. Here's a country where Khalistani elements and extremists have been holding anti-India rallies. They have openly issued threats to our top diplomats. There have been acts of vandalism at India's missions in many parts of Canada. There has been incitement to violence. They have even celebrated the assassination of Indira Gandhi, our former Prime Minister, if you remember that infamous tableau that was part of a celebratory parade. And Justin Trudeau not only continues to defend all of this, calling it freedom of expression, the man has the temerity to turn around and accuse India of being involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen. This is pretty low even by Justin Trudeau's own standards, his domestic political compulsions notwithstanding, Pramit Pal Chaudhary.
What you've described as what the Khalistanis have done in terms of their protests and threats, however, are not necessarily illegal. Incitement can be used and so on as a criminal case, but that itself is not what Indian government is concerned about. What we have been concerned about is much more tangible, which is that since 2016, we have had roughly between 3 to 5 terrorist actions in Punjab. And these are not graffiti or hurling abuse. These are actual terrorist actions where people have been killed or there have been attempts to kill people. The RPG attack on the Mohali police intelligence building, I think, was the most obvious case where you saw actual high-end weapons being used against a police target. In about 3/4, if not more, of those cases, when the Indian system has investigated, there has been a direct link to Canada, to groups inside Canada, either funding or otherwise. Especially funding has been a big issue. Sometimes they've hired people in India to carry out those attacks. Sometimes non-Sikhs as well have been involved. But the link is very clear. And that has been the primary concern India has, is that Canada is simply not doing, in their view, enough or even cooperating enough on the intelligence on this issue. And that is the heart of the Indian complaint at the official level. And this is where we're seeing, I would argue that the G20, it is not anything about Trudeau being snubbed. It was him expressing his anger at India, at what he believed, as you mentioned, as interference. And India basically saying Modi did try. He invited him to everything, but there was obviously no warmth between the two sides. So the G20 was little more than a reflection of an already declining relationship. And as you said, the supposed assassination took place in June, so this has been festering for quite a while. But there are other killings. I mean, there was a Khalistani leader in Lahore was killed, another one in Birmingham. But we'll see what the evidence is, because one thing Indian intelligence and system knows very well is the Khalistanis fight among themselves. The original mastermind for the Kanishka air bombing attack, terror attack, was in fact killed by another Khalistani faction leader. So you have a lot of internal battles, and so the claim that India is necessarily responsible will have to be proven at a really credible level. Trudeau has gone to Britain, he's gone to, I think, Australia, France, America, he's phoned them all up. And so his ministers have presented evidence definitely to the British, and I presume they're now presenting to the Americans. All these countries have expressed concern, but I've noticed that Britain has already said that our free trade agreement conversation, for example, with India, will not in any way be affected by what the Canadians have told them. And we'll see what the Americans say, but I think we'll get a similar statement of vague rhetorical support, but very little else.
Okay, but you know, really, this has very little to do, if you ask me, with how the US reacts or Australia reacts or the UK reacts. This is a bilateral matter between Canada and India. India has repeatedly expressed its concerns. And of course, as Pramit Pal Chaudhary rightly points out, this isn't just about somebody holding an anti-India rally or just issuing threats or inciting violence against Indian diplomats. This goes as far as there being Canadian links to terror activities that have taken place in the state of Punjab. Ambassador Trigunyat, let me ask you this. You know, we both pride ourselves on being vibrant democracies. Surely, if Justin Trudeau was so convinced that he had tangible evidence of the involvement of quote-unquote an Indian agent in the killing of a Canadian citizen, as he puts it, he could have perhaps picked up the phone, spoken to Prime Minister Modi, conveyed a message in many other ways. But instead of that, he decides to enact this drama, calls a special session of Parliament and says Indian agents are involved in this killing, and then they expel our diplomat. What do you think explains the timing of this dramatic action that's been taken by the Justin Trudeau government, given that this killing that we're talking about took place a good 3 months ago and they've not managed to make a single arrest?
Well, Neha, as you know, that this is not the first time. As far as Canada is concerned, we have had these problems for the last 40 years. In 1982, we had asked for Baladev Parmar's extradition, and Pierre Trudeau, the father of Justin Trudeau, at that time came out with a very lame excuse in terms of the Commonwealth laws applying for extradition. Now, it has been once again, Kanishka crash happened. I think there was no further cooperation from their side. They know very well that there is the nexus between the Khalistani groups, which are thriving in their country, and through Pakistan, and they are trying to create trouble in Punjab and elsewhere. It's very well known, and all this evidence has been shared by India. In fact, with Mr. Trudeau also himself, when Prime Minister in 2018, you know, when he came here, you remember that he brought a gentleman who was anti-India. And so all these kind of things, abusing Indian hospitality, and even this time he did the same, I think goes to show that he is trying to project himself as a custodian of the, in my view, using a harsh word, of the extremism, Sikh extremism in Canada. So because of maybe his partners and the government alliance partners, or just to shore up his sagging ratings in the country. But this is not letting him go anywhere. In fact, he is being very myopic, in my view, in doing that. And you asked whether he could not have called Prime Minister Modi. He says that he has spoken to Prime Minister Modi. But then without an evidence, you simply level accusations and you expect the government to take action. How is it possible? Whereas when we have made several démarches, and Parmeet and Ambassador Seth both have recounted those. So there have been a umpteen number of cases where we have presented the total facts to them, yet no action has been forthcoming from their side. So in that situation, what they did was also expelling Diplomat was basically, they are creating a crisis situation. They have precipitated it to a point where India was forced to react and send their Diplomat back. Now, this is something that has brought the relationship to a low now. And so there is no point here of niceties as far as Mr. Trudeau himself is concerned. If he is hell-bent on bringing his country at par with countries like Pakistan, then good luck to them.
Okay, let me go back to Ambassador Seth at this point. Ambassador Seth, I found it very interesting. Pramit Pal Chaudhary says that Justin Trudeau was actually expressing his anger when he was here in India for the G20 summit. He seemed to be sulking throughout. He even skipped the official dinner that was hosted for the G20 leaders. But for Justin Trudeau to now accuse India of being involved in the killing of a man on Canadian soil seems a lot like, you know, the pot calling the kettle black. The question really is, you know, how far do you think Justin Trudeau really wants to take this, and what is he playing at? I come back to the original question that I asked at the start of the show. What is the man playing at here?
As you mentioned also, I think he is trying to shore up his own position within the country, and to remain in government, I think, is what is one of the reasons why he's doing that. And why he's chosen this particular moment is a little difficult to say. But it is not something that is easily understood, because he says he spoke to the Prime Minister and conveyed, but you just can't convey unless you have the evidence. Evidence should have been handed over, and then the government of India could have responded or whatever. But you just can't say now this is not acceptable, you are involved, and I mean that kind of accusation no government is going to accept in any case. And as mentioned before by the other co-panelists, also even the previous times whenever there has been any action wanted, when we wanted them to take action, hand over or extradite people involved in terrorism, in the Kanishka bombing, and many other cases. Even in Punjab, these cases were there, and that's why we had asked for extradition. So whether he's a Canadian citizen or whatever, that is not the issue. The issue is he's indulging in something which is, which is against the sovereignty, against the interest of another friendly country. And also, if you recall, when it first started out after 1984, after Operation Blue Star, when all this movement started, it was Canada which gave them, welcomed all these people and gave them asylum initially. For whatever reason, it was one of the countries which really welcomed them and has given them a place, given them space to do what they want, anti-India, anti-whatever. Anti-world, I think, because even the Sikh community there is not very happy. The larger Sikh community is not very happy with their activities. The Sikh community in Punjab is not very happy with what they are doing. And I think, as somebody jokingly remarked, maybe Khalistan should be created in Canada if they're so pro and so sympathetic to them and to their cause of free speech or free expression or free incitement to terror and murder, whatever. So I don't know what he's actually, it's a little difficult to fathom what PM Trudeau has in mind by doing all this and indulging in this kind of rhetoric. Besides, playing to his partner, going according to what the NDP people are saying and telling him.
Okay, let me take this back to Pramit Pal Chaudhary. Pramit Pal Chaudhary, yes, relations between the two countries have been frosty for many years now. We all remember that, visit by Justin Trudeau in 2018, where it was widely reported that he was cold-shouldered. There was similar reportage about the recent G20 summit, where it was again widely reported that the Prime Minister of India gave Justin Trudeau an earful over his government's inaction against these Khalistani elements. The press release said so as well. And now these dramatic developments, expulsions of diplomats. Looking at the timing of it all, again, I'm going to ask you, what do you think is Justin Trudeau's game plan? And two, where do India-Canada ties really go from here? Because it's almost as if we've hit rock bottom. I mean, of course, Trudeau also recently took the decision to halt all negotiations on the free trade agreement. So it just keeps getting worse.
Well, I think there are two elements. One is, as we mentioned, the security political relationship. Neither country, in my view, is going to be like severing diplomatic ties or anything. Indians are still the single largest foreign student population to Canada, and that will continue. We are a single largest source of immigration to Canada. By 2030, Canada will the single largest ethnic group, immigrant ethnic group in the country will be Indians. And that again is not going to be stopping by any evidence so far. So we will have an interesting country where its largest student population, its largest ethnic group will be Indian. We have a political problem with Trudeau. This is very important to stress. We do not have a problem with Canada. We had an excellent relationship with the previous Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, the Conservative Prime Minister, who actually did address many of our terrorist concerns on terrorism, tried to work with us on counterterrorism. Trudeau reversed a lot of that, or is seen to at least be indifferent to Indian concerns. So in effect, we have one party, or at least one Prime Minister in Canada, which we have a major problem with. But it is not a problem that will disrupt the relationship. It's none of these, the Khalistanis are not an existential threat to India. They are something we can handle. We are not happy with what's been going on, but this is nothing on the level of our problems with many of our other definitely neighboring countries like Pakistan and so on. And the second part of it is the economic relationship continues to be reasonably strong. The FTA is really an attempt to take that relationship to a higher level, but even without the FTA, for example, Canadian pension funds are among the largest investors into India. About 50 to 60 billion dollars have been invested by Canadian pension funds in our infrastructure, our highways, our power sector, and so on. And there's no evidence that that's going to be changing anytime soon. The FTA would have allowed us to potentially double that number, and now we may have to wait both for the Indian elections to be over and possibly for the Canadian elections to be over. So that's still almost one to 2 years away. But otherwise, the economic relationship continues, and so far neither side has allowed our political problems and our disagreements on these issues to affect that economic relationship. So that continues, and hopefully we'll survive this. I think right now India's view is they've done the tit for tat diplomatic reaction, and basically it's over as far as India is concerned. It's really up to Canada to decide whether they want to escalate this.
It is up to Canada to decide whether they want to escalate this. Well, it's all been started really by Justin Trudeau. But Ambassador Trigunyat, let me ask you this. Pramitpal Chaudhary seems to think that this may be a major irritant and this is a new low, certainly for the bilateral relationship, but these events will not disrupt the relationship. The economic ties still remain intact. The people-to-people ties remain intact. But the question that I want to put to you is, how do you think India is likely going forward to deal with this brazenness and sheer disregard for its concerns by the Canadian Prime Minister? Because even as Mr. Chaudhary says that this isn't about a country, this is about one leader. But fact of the matter is, this is the leader you have to deal with. He is the Prime Minister of that country.
Well, you're right. I mean, I think I fully agree with Pramit as far as the larger relationship is concerned. But of course, it is Prime Minister Trudeau whose dependency on his political partners is pretty evident, and that may be the driving force for him, frankly. I mean, those snubs and all those things are just there, and he knew very well what he did earlier to basically deserve it. But at the same time, and Prime Minister Modi did receive him, even allowed him this sort of a stole on him and everything, and it was decent. We were not being disrespectful to him, but at the same time, we are not friendly enough. So how do you convey the message to the person who is not responding to your concern or sensitivities? And therefore, that's what happened. So I believe that the relationship, as Pramit said, I also agree that it will depend on exactly Justin Trudeau now, which way he wants to take it. If he is going to escalate further, try to continue into cannot and the false documentation or creating, because they are also part of it. Just don't forget the Canadians also, I mean, they are talking about these sovereignty issues and this, that. When have they respected the sovereignty? What happened in Afghanistan, Libya, or Iraq for that matter, went along with the Americans. So all these countries have their own geopolitical objectives and goals, and there they don't mind anything. But if something happens in their country, then they're trying to provoke and invoke, and they're very well known to have manufactured evidences as well. We have seen in the Iraq case. So I am not quite sure that they're going to come up with anything credible, but this is just gaining browning points in a political and domestic spectrum that he's dealing with now. His own personal chips are pretty down at the moment. So I think he's just trying to work on it at this moment. And this particular thing happens to be, I think, a ready available alibi to him.
You're quite right, Ambassador. Justin Trudeau's political stock back home seems to be rather low, because following the G20 summit, he actually got a lot of flack from his own media. And there has been a lot of speculation of late in Canada about whether Justin Trudeau is going to quit. And he's had to issue a clarification saying, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not quitting as Prime Minister of Canada. But that apart, Ambassador Manju Seth, I will give you the last word. Pramitpal Chaudhary says this will not disrupt the relationship. But fact is that, things are very, very frosty right now between the two countries. How do you see things panning out going forward? And really, how do we come back from this? I mean, diplomatic expulsions, that is a very serious step that has been taken by the two countries. How do we come back from this?
Absolutely, and I, sorry, I agree with Mr. Pramit that this is about him, about PM Trudeau. It's not about Canada or if there's another government in Canada or another prime minister. I'm quite confident that the relationship will be back on an even keel again. Because there is a lot of goodwill between the people at the people-to-people level, and even at the other political level, except I think with this particular government and their ally, where they seem to be in a very anti-India kind of mode, and the relationship has hit up, as you said, it's a frosty note, and it is at a little quite low. But I don't think it will disrupt it or the relationship will be broken off, because we have, as mentioned by Mr. Pramit, we have a lot of Indians there, students going there regularly. The trade ties are very robust. So keeping all that in mind, I don't think the relationship will be completely disrupted or broken. While the expulsion is not a very, it's a reciprocal expulsion and not a very good step by them, and which we had to reciprocate naturally once it's been done. But I think it was not called for. But Justin Trudeau is Justin Trudeau, and he has taken this step for whatever reasons, domestic reasons, whatever. And now he's saying that, India just wants, we're not provoking India, we just want answers. But this is not the way to get answers or ask for answers. I think I would put it in a way that he has really messed it up in a way, and put the relationship into a new low, so to speak. And a lot of work would need to be done to get it back on an even keel, at least by his government. It's not going to get...
Because I don't think India is going to be in any mood, really, to sort of, extend an olive branch in any way. But very quickly, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, one more question before I let you and the other panelists go. Of course, there is a lot of anger in India over what Justin Trudeau has done. He's accused India of being involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen. He's expelled our diplomat. He calls these credible allegations. Where is the credible evidence is a question that still remains unanswered. On top of everything, he goes ahead and identifies this Indian diplomat as the head of the research and analysis wing in Canada. That is not something that friendly countries do. Could you unmute yourself?
Sorry, should we say the overt intelligence officer in every embassy among friendly countries is well known to most people, even to journalists, for example. The covert side is where we try not to have either side speak about it. And I presume the Canadian diplomat who was expelled, Sylvester, had a similar position. He must have at least be a liaison with our intelligence agencies. But what that really signifies is that there is a complete collapse of intelligence cooperation between the two governments. And I think that's the primary message that is being sent here. So that is where, on the security side, we will obviously not be seeing any forward movement for quite some time to go. And we will see for a number of years, potentially, before that recovers. And as we've discussed, possibly not until Trudeau leaves office. So I think that's the real message that comes out of that. Do not expect any real cooperation between the two of us on counterterrorism for quite some time. That element of the relationship is effectively dead.
It certainly is. And if any one of us thought that things couldn't get any frostier between India and Canada following the G20 summit, well, there you have it. Justin Trudeau has dealt a body blow, yet another body blow to this bilateral relationship. And now there's a joke doing the rounds in the capital. Will their diplomat actually leave in 5 days, or will he need an extra 2 days just in case the aircraft doesn't take off on time? But on that note, Ambassador Manju Seth, Ambassador Anil Trigunyat, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, as always, a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. All right, on that note, let's slip into a quick break here on Global Lens. Don't go anywhere. We have more for you on the other side.
GPT. It can generate codes and human-like responses through text, write stories, and do a lot more.
I work in a news